Evening, everybody. My name is Rod Escayola, and I'm your condominium lawyer at Gowling WLG. Here it is. After a summer break hiatus, folks, we're finally relaunching the Condo Advisor webinar series. It's going to be a new and improved sort of brewing. I'm just making that up. It's just going to be the same old gang presenting the same old things, I guess. But we're hoping, tonight we're going to talk about COVID a bit. But we're hoping to be able to shake off this topic and eventually sort of widen the horizons. But here we are launching our webinars series on September 9th. And so what I've done, I've called upon the Fab Four and our two condo twins to see if they were willing to jump back in and join us. And to my surprise, everybody said yes. And so everybody's back. Well, the two twins didn't really have much say into it, but the other guests are here. So you'll see some friendly faces. Now, keeping with tradition, we've looked for a theme to introduce the panelists tonight. And we decided to go with an 80s theme simply because being reunited again tonight together, talking about COVID again tonight, it just felt like going back in time. It just felt like a Groundhog's Day that just is on repeat. And so here we are. We're going to go around the table reintroducing your friendly crew. From Apollo Property Management, he's warned us that he'd be back, and here he is, Sean the Terminator Cornish. Hi, Sean. How's it going?
Excellent, Rod. It's very good to be back, and it's nice to see everyone was able to get a post-COVID haircut, or
right.
at least post-confinement haircut, not post-COVID. Looking forward to this.
Thanks so much for being here. From Crossbridge, speaking on behalf of ACMO, just made it in the door at the last minute, a manager extraordinaire who's really just wants to have fun. Catherine Cindy Lauper-Gow. How's it going, Catherine?
Girls just want to have fun, and what's more fun than back to school time?
That's right. From Lash Condo Law, speaking also on behalf of the Community Association Institute of Canada, living in the material world and updating you on material changes to the Condo Act, Denise Madonna Lash. Hi, Denise.
Hi, great to be here. Can't wait to talk about virtual meetings.
That's right. And of course, our condo twins, I'm sure you picked up on the fact that they're actually wearing the same color today. It wasn't planned, but there it is. So two condo lawyers at Gowling WLG. We have Graham and David, AKA Millie and Vanilli, lip syncing tonight to the CAO tune. Hello, boys.
Howdy.
My shade of red is slightly darker.
Yeah, for the record, they are different shades of red.
That's right. And finally, from the National Life Safety Group, the man who never takes a day off, Jason Ferris Bueller Reed. How's it going, Jason?
I'm fantastic. Happy to be back.
Now, the chat line is open. I think David's going to try to moderate that. If you have questions, you can try to sort of put them in the Q&A section. And if we don't answer it, then you'll know that for sure we're just ignoring you or we just ran out of time. Now, before we jump in, your favorite part of the webinar, the disclaimer. So for those of you watching this webinar, we'd ask you to keep the following in mind. First, when we refer to legislation, we're referring to the Ontario legislation. So if you're listening from abroad, you'll have to maybe do some tweaking to what we say. Also keep in mind that the information we provide today is accurate as of today. It's September 9th, 5 o'clock. So just keep that in mind if you're watching this in a rebroadcast. Most importantly, keep in mind that the information we provide you tonight is general in nature. It may not necessarily apply to the specific situation you're in. It's really important for you to seek proper advice tailored to the facts and to your situations, whether you need advice from a lawyer or a manager or an engineer or a security advisor. Make sure that you get the straight goods. And finally, for some weird reason, I have to tell you that the seminar is being recorded. But the good part of it is I will be uploading it to the Condo Advisor site. So if you're missing the presentation tonight, you'll be able to watch it as a rebroadcast. Don't ask me how long it takes to upload it. I'm not the one doing that. I'm not that smart, but we usually take about a couple of days to a week to upload it. Okay, so there it is. Where are we at now? Let me just move on to who's going to present. There it is. So for the Dallas fans out there, and by Dallas I'm really referring to the TV show. You know how every episode would start with "Last on Dallas." So we're going to do the same here. Where we left things off, we were in the middle of a pandemic. The province was shut down. we were still in phase 2. And maybe David, you can update us on what has happened since we last parted on June 24th.
So COVID's still here, but the technical emergency has ended. So the emergency period and all the legislation related to that, the Emergency Management Act, has now been replaced by Bill 195. So this is the Reopening Ontario Act. At the end of the day, many of those same orders that we had beforehand remain in effect. They're just now, it's more simple and agile for the provincial government to be able to amend some of those orders going forward. But we're all in stage 3 as of mid-August. Everyone, all of the public health units made it into stage 3. So as you've all been experiencing, a number of facilities around the province have been reopening with restrictions, things like gyms, stores, casinos, restaurants. I've been enjoying the patio scene for as long as the weather has been lovely here in Ottawa. Unlike in Denver, I don't know if any of you saw that, but Denver had both a massive snowstorm and 110-degree weather within 24 hours of each other. So global warming. And just on the condo front, you can now realize that real estate agents are allowed to hold open houses. So that might be one thing affecting condos. And there are certain public gatherings that are allowed, limited again, 50 indoors and 100 outdoors. Again, keeping in mind that condos can be more restrictive than permissive. And we'll get into that in more detail later on. And we're all now in stage 3 for another 4 weeks, as the Ford government recently announced. As the numbers have been spiking slightly in certain areas, we're likely to stay in stage 3 for 4 weeks.
Okay, and things to keep in mind is, so now that we're in stage 3, and we'll talk about that tonight, you get all sorts of owners and all sorts of neighbors that are pushing and screaming and demanding that you reopen your amenities. And so I think tonight we're going to start talking about stage 4, which really only applies to condo land, I think, and trying to balance as we're reopening on many fronts. For that to make sense, people are going back to school and the gyms are reopening and so on and so forth. Well, you know, we sort of need to also try to balance that with being more careful on different fronts. So we'll see how that stage 3, or as Catherine referred to yesterday when we were practicing, the stage 4 to come, how does that apply to condo land? I think I forgot something before we go on. Learning opportunities. So David updated us on how we got to where we are now, but September is upon us. People are going back to school and there's all sorts of learning opportunities for the condo geeks out there watching tonight. Denise, do you want to update us on, really, I think it's Canada's first virtual condo conference that's coming up in September.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. So this is CAI Canada's virtual condo conference. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, if you can attend, it's free for members. It's $35 if you're not a member. It's over 2 days, but you can visit virtual booths, which is really interesting. And then, of course, there are going to be sessions, and I know that I think the 3 of you are speaking, like Rod, Graham, and David. You're all speaking at the conference on interesting topics. So it pays to go on to this website and see what the agenda is, and then see the booths, because I'll be there, Lash Condo Lawn. We're giving away free socks, but you have to attend to get your pair. So well worth attending for various reasons.
Nice. So Canada's first virtual condo conference just around the corner, and $35 if you're not a member. And you can look at the agenda and you can register by going on that website. Catherine, I think yesterday we were talking about there's ACMO has its monthly webinar.
We do have monthly webinars. Our next webinar will take place on the 30th of September. So log into the ACMO website to register. We're also restarting luncheons, but of course in a virtual format. And the first of those will take place on the 23rd of October. We'll also have our awards ceremony to take place in conjunction with our November 27th virtual luncheon. So all of you out there in condo land who have a terrific manager, please look out for your opportunity to nominate them for one of our awards. And finally, we have a survey out currently to all of the managers in condo land. And if you haven't already done so, please participate in that.
Okay, wonderful. So now that the housekeeping's out of the way, something happened this summer. Various municipalities initially they took the position that you had to wear a mask in any indoor public space, but then for some weird reason they excluded condo land, and then after that they came back and they said, well, please could you kind of consider that, and then they came back to the drawing board, and one municipality after the other, quite a few of them adopted and what they should have done in the first place, a municipal bylaw regulating masks in common elements. So Graham, can you sort of update us on that? Where do we stand on to mask or not to mask in condos?
Well, if you live in a lot of the cities across Ontario, and I mean, we've listed here on the slide here some ones that came to mind. It's entirely possible that in smaller cities or municipalities, similar bylaws are in place. So it's important to always check with your municipality. But if you're in a condominium in any of these places, for example, regardless of whether your condominium has a rule or a policy in place about masks and mandating that you wear them in the common elements, it doesn't matter, because for these places at least, the municipalities have in place bylaws that are mandating masks for enclosed public spaces, and that's going to include your common elements. Between each municipality, the bylaws vary to certain degrees, but the main features that you see repeated in all of them are that, for one, the responsibility to enforce these bylaws rests with the operator or owner of the enclosed public space. So that would be the condominium. So this is something that condominiums should be aware of and keep in mind, and that the responsibility is often theirs, and they're the ones who will be looked to when it comes to compliance or not. And then most of them also have in place a requirement that, in addition to that masks be worn in the enclosed public spaces, that mandatory signage go up explaining the requirement to wear masks. And they all have exemptions to them too. So for example, if there's a child under 2 years old, or certain children with certain developmental issues who are under 5 years old may not have to wear a mask, people with certain medical conditions or who are engaging in an activity that requires them not to wear a mask can be exempt. So you know, rather than read you the legislation, not that I'm sure everyone would love that, they're all viewable very easily. You can just do a quick Google search of enter your town name or city name and mask bylaw, and it will certainly come up, and we can put up links to those too. But what's important to keep in mind too is with those exemptions that I just listed, the bylaws all tend to say that no one can be required to give you proof of an exemption. So if someone says, I have a medical condition that pursuant to which I'm not going to be wearing this mask, the municipal bylaws in place don't allow corporations to require proof of these things under those municipal bylaws. Now, it's also important, I think, to just briefly touch on some of the differences between city to city. One of them that I kind of mentioned in a couple of seconds ago was the requirement to enact a policy. So, for example, in Toronto, the municipal bylaw actually does require operators of enclosed public spaces to enact a formal mask policy, versus in Ottawa, for example, that's not required. Similarly, for enforcement purposes, there are different levels of authority given to the operators of these spaces. In Ottawa, if you find someone who is not complying with the bylaw, the bylaw simply says that they are to be given a verbal reminder. Whereas in Hamilton, with the iron fist of the law, they've held that that if you find someone not complying, they can be asked to immediately leave. So it's important to check what your municipality is doing and see what the variance nuances are where you are, and make sure that if, for example, you are in a municipality where a policy is required, that your condominium get one going, because ultimately the responsibility to follow them lies with the operator of these spaces.
Right. So, Graham, one of the questions that came up a few times already in the chat channel is, so where would we be required to wear a mask if some of these bylaws were in place? So wherever these municipal bylaws are in place, what do we mean by having to wear them in enclosed public space? What does that mean?
So that would mean any indoor common area. So your hallways, your elevators, your gym, your
Party
stairwells. Room. Am I missing any? Yeah, party room. So I mean, the whole gamut of everything that is an interior common area.
Right. And many of these municipal bylaws have exceptions in addition to the exemptions. They have exceptions. So, for instance, if you're involved in a physical exercise, including water sport or water-based exercise, then
Yeah,
obviously
exactly.
you have to wear it. But you would have to wear your mask to the gym and maybe actually to the treadmill. And then when you start exerting, you wouldn't have to wear it anymore. And obviously, once you jump in the water, you don't need to wear it. So,
Yeah.
but have a look at your specific municipality to make sure that you comply with the bylaw, either as an occupant or as a corporation, because as Graham said, sometimes you need to adopt a policy in addition to having to put signs up and so on and so forth.
And I saw a really good question in chat, and I just want to assure you that that is going to be something that gets discussed. Is that, you know, something I said, for example, is that in Hamilton, the bylaw says you can ask that person to leave, but I mean, if they live there, if they're an owner there, that may not necessarily apply. So we're going to talk in just a little bit about mask policies or enforcement of them.
Oh, like right now, actually. Okay, perfect.
There
So
you go. Look at.
let's do that. And so I want to maybe turn to the managers. And my first question will be to you, Sean. Are you faced with many exemption requests, and how do you deal with that? And Catherine, the question for you will be, are you being asked by owners to crack the whip and enforce it? So back to Sean. Sean, are you faced with a lot of requests for exemptions, and how do you deal with those?
So it's actually, you know, there's been a lot of, I'd have to say, and it's probably overused, but surreal moments in the life of this pandemic so far. And masks are one of those. Like it's such a contentious issue in so many areas, but not in Ottawa. You know, we had a bylaw that was passed in early July or mid-July for public spaces. And then that was extended with a direction from the public health on to condos, not a requirement, just a direction. And then that was followed by a bylaw that then extended it to condos and apartments. But throughout that whole process, it hasn't been a contentious issue. People have been very willing to wear masks, and we haven't had a lot of issues where we've had to deal with people not wearing them. And for the most part, the approach from Ottawa Public Health has always been more on the education side, the encouragement side, rather than enforcement side. So anytime we've had any issues with people not wearing them, simple reminders, simple, you know, gentle suggestions have generally led to compliance without any conflict or any further issues. We have not had a lot of complaints from owners about other residents. It's generally going to be contractors who are trying to get in and not following the rules. But again, we're a lot stricter with them. They're not allowed in if they're not compliant. But residents are much more, you know, they're neighbors. They're all in the shared community. They tend to take it much better. So we really haven't had to deal with exemptions and having to either question it or not question it.
So how about you, Catherine? Are you being asked by owners to crack the whip and enforce it? Are people sort of ratting out the neighbor? And how do you deal with those situations?
I think for certain folks are concerned, and especially because of the density of the residences in Toronto and the proximity of folks, you know, needing to use the elevator. Where there are people who have exemptions, they've advised us that they have exemptions. We also have taken the honey rather than vinegar approach, and we found that to be the best in terms of gaining compliance, either in reminding folks to wear masks or for those who require exemptions, speaking with them about right of way in the elevator, right? So if somebody else is in the elevator, you're someone who can't wear a mask, it perhaps is reasonable to wait for that person to have completed using the elevator before, you know, forcing your way into it, for instance. A lot of what we are learning in condo land and in the wide world on account of COVID is how to be patient and how to be accommodating of each other, how to be understanding of one another. And I think in large part, you know, that is part of what our best practices are, is to gain that level of understanding amongst everybody who lives in the corporation. One of the questions in the chat is whether I would consider the underground garage, for instance, as an area that requires a mask, and I would. One of the other things that Sean touched upon, and I'm sure Jason will agree with, is our tact is quite a bit different with contractors because our relationship with them is different and our authority with them in a lot of ways is different. The other thing to consider and to contemplate is how we can ensure the protection and safety of condominium workers and employees if you do have somebody who's unable to wear a mask. And we chatted briefly about how to engage with people, how to maintain distance, and how to use things like plexiglass barriers when communicating with them in order to ensure safety.
Right. Denise, maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but in Toronto, you have to prepare policies for condo corporations. Do you have enforcement sort of mechanisms in your policies, and how do those work?
Yeah, so when we started hearing about the potential for mandatory mask wearing and policies, our office is really concerned that we better, when we draft these policies, make some really good enforcement provisions. So what we did is characterize mask wearing as something that's for the health and safety of its residents. So if somebody who breaches it is in breach of Section 117 of the Condominium Act. And so the policies refers to enforcement letters, breaches, commencing compliance applications. We put it all in there because we wanted to make sure we could enforce it. Now, I tend to agree with Sean, like we haven't had to enforce. It looks like, for the most part, residents are complying. So, it's something that's very interesting. I didn't expect it, which is a good thing. So really good enforcement provisions that we haven't had to use.
Right. Perfect. Okay, so that's about masks. We got to keep moving, folks, because time is ticking, and we want to try to fit it within an hour. Who am I kidding? Not going to work. We'll try. The next topic is AGMs, and whether or not they can be held virtually, whether or not we need a bylaw. The landscape has changed so much this summer that maybe if we could get an update from, I'm not even sure who's supposed to speak about that. Graham, you're up again. Yes.
I'm up again.
So maybe help us understand does the landscape look like now, keeping in mind that we got an email yesterday from the ministry sort of tweaking that again.
Yeah, and so I mean we'll get into that and the kind of intrigue that follows. But for now, in terms of what is solidly in place, as David said, on July 24th, they formally announced that COVID's still here, but the quote unquote emergency period is over as of July 24th. And what that meant for condo corporations who hadn't held their AGMs yet were that the corporations whose AGMs were supposed to be due during the emergency period were given an extension of 90 days, or in some cases 120 days, to hold their AGMs. And I think the easiest way to illustrate that will be on the next slide. You'll see, even if you want to go there now quickly, this is a chart that I find very helpful, and anyone we've shown it to finds it helpful to calculate when your AGM is supposed to be now based on when your fiscal year end is. And this takes into account the emergency period and Bill 195 that ended it and all that stuff. So this is available on Condo Advisor, and Rod, are we going to post the slideshow as well?
Yeah, we'll post a slideshow, but if on Condo Advisor, if you click on the AGM calculator, the first link, it brings you to that, because that's sort of we're still in the exception period, but there it is. So find the end of your fiscal year. It'll tell you when you have to hold your AGM, and it'll tell you when you have to
have your preliminary. Yeah. And so rather than read those all to you, there it is. But you'll see here that there is one big date in yellow, and that's because there's also a very important date with respect to the deadline to hold virtual AGMs if your condo doesn't have a virtual meeting/voting bylaw. And that deadline, if you don't have such a bylaw, is November 21st, which is actually a Saturday. So you may want to treat it as November 20th. And this, I think, raises an interesting question that will probably lead into the email from the ministry that we just talked about. But there could then feasibly be a situation where a corporation is in a bit of a meeting paralysis. If they wait too long and don't hold their AGM until after November 21st and they don't have a bylaw yet, they're in a position where, we're still stuck with the 50-person rule. So they may be in a position where, you know, they can't hold the meeting in person because there's too many people, but then they can't hold it not in person because they don't have the bylaw yet, and they might be stuck in a sort of meeting paralysis. And I think that might be a good segue into the email from the ministry.
Oh, and so who's going to talk about that?
I might lean on Denise to help me out with that one.
All right. Yeah. Well, it was interesting. When I got the email, I was expecting a lot more. But what it did say was confirm that the deadline for your AGM is as you've got on your chart here. So that is not going to be extended, which means condominium corporations, you've got to hold your meeting before, whether it's the October deadline or November. And I know that there are service providers that don't have evening meetings, but you've got to hold them. So you got to do it on a weekend. And Graham, when you said that the November 21st is a Saturday, well, service providers are providing meetings on the weekends just to accommodate the demand. So weekends, daytimes, don't have it in the evening, and make sure that you fulfill that requirement to have your AGM before the deadline. Now, what's very interesting, if you look at that email that went around, and I did follow up with the ministry, it talks about the other part of this, which is virtual meetings. So not just the AGM deadline, which we know cannot be extended, but having a virtual meeting without a bylaw. And I think the words are, the ministry is exploring extending that period.
Yeah, so I moved the email on the screen, but it's really not helpful.
Does it say? Well, I got an email yesterday from the ministry confirming
Right.
that the ministry is considering, which what does that mean? I don't know, but extending the ability to hold a virtual meeting without a bylaw, and also email consent. So right now, in order to get notices by email, after November 21st, you would need consent or agreement from owners. They're looking at extending that as well. So two things. So we'll just have to wait, whether that's, you know, whether that happens or not, we don't know. So in the meantime, you get your bylaw in place.
Okay, so I guess the lesson from this segment is this. The deadlines to hold your AGMs, regardless of how you hold them, those are not extended, and those are the dates on the screen that you have to abide by, and it's based on the end of your fiscal year. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, if you want to hold your AGM virtually, electronically, you either have to do it before November 21st, if you don't have a bylaw authorizing you otherwise to do so, or if you have a bylaw authorizing you to hold a virtual AGM, then you could hold it after November 21st. But that extension may actually change depending on which side of the bed Doug Ford wakes up one day, or whoever is drafting the legislation. So there it is. I think to play it safe, you should adopt a bylaw going forward in any event. So that's for that. Are we done with this? Yes, we're done.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, and so let's talk about how virtual meetings have unfolded, because when we were talking about it last spring, we were talking about like this, you know, it was going to be, you know, like sort of, you know, the best thing since sliced bread. It was going to be fantastic. It was going to resolve, you know, the crisis in the Middle East. Everybody was going to be happy. Everybody was going to be friendly. And so, but now some of these meetings did take place. And so I'm going to turn to both you, Graham and Sean, to maybe tell us how they've, whether or not virtual meetings have lived up to our expectations. Maybe Sean, how did they go?
Yeah, it's I share your enthusiasm, at least at the beginning, and it's actually carried through. We had a turnover meeting that was held fairly early on in the process, or in the emergency period, and it was a gong show. It was a 16-unit building. It took about 2 hours to get through a turnover meeting, which really there isn't that much to do other than elect a board and turn over the documents of the corporation. That was the low end as far as the experience goes. Since then, it's been very positive. We found a lot of owners are more engaged in the meetings. They tend to be more efficiently run, depending on the chair, of course, but that's always the case. And very good. The only difficulty that we're having is that there isn't consistent acceptance across our portfolio. So we do have certain boards, certain owner groups that are not accepting of virtual meetings. And so they're going to, in some cases, fairly extreme lengths to try to hold in-person meetings rather than a virtual meeting, to the extent that some viewed it as actually illegal because of the potential disenfranchisement of elderly owners who might not have access to technology to participate. So we've had the full range of responses, but overall, it's been very positive. And we certainly encourage the passing of the electronic voting bylaw to be able to continue in the future beyond November.
Right. I'm a bit surprised. Well, I'm not surprised to hear that people are sort of, some people are resisting and some people are sort of, not overly keen on it. But in my experience, every single time that we've held one of these meetings, people were satisfied and people were quite pleased with the outcome. And this sort of urban myth that the elders are not able to figure things out on the internet, I mean, that has not panned out. And it's really, it's like coaxing your buddies to jump into the pool. Every single time people were happy in the pool. It's never happened that somebody left the pool saying, I knew I'd get wet, I hate it. It doesn't happen. So, but you just need a bit of coaxing. And once, it's a lot more difficult to explain a virtual meeting than to actually do it. But Graham, you've chaired quite a few of these. How did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky enough to help out a couple of condominiums with their virtual meetings, and I got to say, I think the process works really, really well, assuming that that the planning on the front end has been done correctly and everything goes well at the meeting. And we'll get into some sort of tips and tricks, but it's like Sean said. I think in my view, from what I've seen, the owners tend to be a lot more engaged and care more about the issues and tend to be paying more attention. I think that the meetings are more well planned and well thought out, and I think they run a lot more efficiently and quickly. In my experience, the meetings tend to end a lot earlier than what we're used to seeing in AGMs. And not that everybody doesn't like spending their late evenings sitting in an AGM. It's I think a lot easier to do if you can do it from your sweatpants in your living room for one less hour and still get all the business done all right.
Right. And so some of the drawbacks, Graham, I see here that there's a mention, how do we deal with people without computers?
Yeah, so, and that is a drawback. The workaround for that is that most platforms for virtual meetings can have people call in and participate by way of phone. The drawback with that, unfortunately, is that it does lead to a little bit less participation from those people because it's harder to engage with them. But I mean, I think David encapsulated it best in one of these webinars that we did, that we often hear that that elderly people sometimes feel like this isn't fair and that they're being left out. But I mean, the entire purpose of this whole setup is to make sure that elderly people, like all of us, are kept safe and able to participate as much as possible. So I think that's the way to think of it. And it's like you said, Rod, I mean, it's just like jumping in a pool. I've helped out corporations where, they've warned me that either board members or large groups of owners are really resistant to this idea and it's not going to work. And then it runs fine. And the owners who they said would never figure it out are the first ones to raise their hand and offer something at the meeting. So I really think it's just an issue of, like you said, it's a hard concept to get your head around, but once you see it happen, it's remarkably easy.
Right. And so for those without computer, I guess they can call in, but they would have to cast their vote ahead of time, because you cannot vote and you can't raise your hand by phone and you can't really participate. By phone, it's like listening to a radio broadcast. And so that's certainly not as the same level of participation as if you were to log in. And because when you log in, you can raise your hand, you can type in a question, you can speak, you can have your microphone turned on, and so on and so forth. So that is maybe one of the drawbacks. Tips and tricks, who's going to tackle that? Graham, are you going to give it the
Yeah,
first?
I mean, I can talk about what I've seen that's worked, and I can tell you that things that really work and make the meeting go very smoothly are, if at the beginning of the meeting you kind of set the housekeeping and ground rules. So what I mean by that is, for example, you know, just so everyone knows, at this meeting, we're going to be responding to questions. If you raise your virtual hand, if you write something in chat, it's not going to get responded to. So please, if you want to be heard, raise your hand. We will get to you in the queue. And when you're doing things like that, it's important that before you start the meeting, you make sure that everyone knows, okay, so before we get to business, here's how you raise your hand. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. Just so that everyone feels like they can do it, and you run a few tests with the audience before you start, and it's never been a problem.
Okay, let's do it. Let's ask people that are watching the webinar to raise their hands to see how easy it is. Oh, well, there it is. And so
there you go.
There it is.
There you go.
Everybody's
The nice thing about it too is that it actually tracks manager YCC75 fastest hands in the West. You actually press the button first, and it does track that for us,
Right.
so that it does create a queue that we can fairly get who put their hand up first.
Okay, there it is. So that's it. I'm lowering all your hands. You don't get to vote. You don't get to speak. Okay, back to you, Graham. Anything else?
Yeah, and then it's one other very important thing, and I think something that a lot of owners were concerned about with these meetings was that it might be too easy for the chair of the meeting. You know, if I'm the chair, it might be too easy for me to railroad through it and ignore an owner who's asking questions I don't like. And so it's very important, I think, to the fairness of the meeting that that whoever's chairing it makes sure that when somebody is given an opportunity to talk, you need to open their microphone, let them say their entire question, don't cut them off at all, give them an answer, and then see what they respond to that. Because the last thing you want to do if you're controlling the microphone is be cutting people off, because that's something we lose from in-person meetings, is people's ability to make sure that they're being heard. So I think you have to go the extra mile to make sure that the meeting is transparent. And that, I think, frankly, is just a benefit to the meeting.
Yeah. And similarly, you can make the questions visible by everybody, right?
Yeah.
It's all in the setting. Were you going to say something? Go ahead.
I think the opportunity that you have, further to your point, Graham, that's really important is you can see the transparency in action, right? You can see all of the people in the audience who have raised their hands. You can acknowledge each, and it's fair, as you've said, in terms of who gets to speak first. And I think that also you're not distracted by the side conversations or, you know, discussions in the background. The other opportunity that you have in a virtual setting is to use a specific forum strictly for troubleshooting issues and causes. And some of your service providers can help somebody who might be struggling in order to participate well. And so I think it offers some distance in having a host that's completely objective to the process as well. So it helps the chairperson to demonstrate the fact that they're being fair and equitable to all of the participants of the meeting.
Right. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my last tip and trick too. I think it leads very well into that, is that one of the most important things you can do is make sure that clear instructions are sent to everyone, easy to follow step-by-step instructions, just so all people have to do is click this button, type their name here, and that's that. Then it's done, you know, it's over. It's not that hard. And so I think that's, like Catherine said, one of the extra value items that you get when you go with a professional, one of the service providers that can help put these meetings on.
Right. And perhaps maybe one of the bigger challenges that we're faced with now is platform availability.
Yeah.
So I don't want to name service providers, but I will anyways. I know that GetQuorum earlier on indicated that, you know, their evenings were pretty booked, but, you know, they had day availability, they had maybe weekend availability, and I know that they're working on another system where there's probably going to be more like a self-serve kind of product that they're about to launch maybe in early November. Condo Voter and Denise, maybe you can talk about that, but I know that Condo Voter also is offering daytime, weekends, weekend evenings, weekend days. But I mean, the demand is such that you're being there's a lot of demand for Condo Voter. Do you know? Can you speak to that, Denise?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of demand. I think Condo Voter is doing between 4 to 6 meetings every evening, and they've offered it up to, you know, weekends, as I said before, weekends and daytime. So, I mean, it really pays for people to inquire with all the service providers and say you're flexible. Just, you know, daytime. You can really hold these meetings during the day. Most people are available.
Right.
You know, it's important to get those meetings and that bylaw passed.
Right. And I know that some managers are also providing that service. Some minute takers are providing that service. Some lawyers are providing that service. We're actually at Gowlings, we're hosting tons of AGMs coming up. We're getting, our evenings are filling up as well. We still have availability, but I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are providing the ability, if Condo Voter is booked on the evening that you want and you don't have the flexibility to find another time, well, there may be other providers out there, and there's others. Actually, there are others. Now, how does that work for voting? I saw a question, Denise, so I'm going to put you on the spot because that wasn't rehearsed yesterday, but somebody asked, well, how does the voting work? And I sort of understand that this is probably like two streams. One thing is the platform itself to host a meeting, but how do we deal with votes at these?
Well, that's right. I mean, Condo Voter does both, and they can offer the electronic voting separately, but you know, Rod, how you've done it. You sort of have to be trained on on voting electronically yourself if you're chairing the meeting. So these meetings, I think where other lawyers are offering them, I don't really know. I mean, our office has, they're really proxy meetings. So you have your Zoom platform and then you go and you collect your proxies. And that's how you conduct those meetings.
Right, right. Some of them are, but I know the way we're providing both the meeting and the ability to vote electronically. We're doing that, but we're really doing that to help people that are in a bind, because at the end of the day, that's not the business I'm in. I'm no IT person here. So anyway, so reach out to the providers and try to see if they have some availability and try to be flexible. Because I mean, they're the professionals and it's so smooth. I mean, I've done some with both main providers and it runs so smoothly when you give them the whole thing and they deal with it and they deal with the notices and they deal with the voting. It's a beautiful thing. So we're running out of time, but maybe next webinar, Denise, we're going to talk about hybrid meetings and how people are presenting that, like, you know, the new world. But we'll have to talk about that next webinar, I think. Because the main topic today at 5:42 was the reopening of your amenities. That was the main topic. And I always keep it for the end. I keep the best part for the end with Jason mainly. So what do we got here? I mean, where do I start with this? I have been approached by both groups and they're both enraged. Some groups that are begging and pleading and screaming to have their amenities open, and they're telling you, well, listen, the Good Life is open and the YMCA is open. Well, how come we can't open? And I've also been approached by other people that are, you know, asking me to make sure that I prevent the corporation from opening their amenities. And so what I've done today, very briefly and anecdotally, I sort of reached out to some property managers to get a sense of how open are the amenities in condo land so far. And I was a bit surprised because it felt that Ottawa was maybe a bit more open, and maybe it was to distract us from other scandals that are taking place on Parliament Hill. I don't know, but we're a bit more open. I think we're probably 40% of the condos down here seem to have open some or most of their amenities. But the GTA, the sound that I get from the GTA is that maybe it's closer to 20 or 30% of condos are opening their amenities. So let's turn to you, Sean. What is being open and how are people tackling this?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of, sorry, I shouldn't say there's a lot. I mean, certainly there are some people agitating for access to amenities. For the most part, through the summer, it related to outdoor amenities. Beautiful rooftop patio, nobody was accessing. So that was really the kind of the big push. We've got a bit of that mixed bag as we talked about 40, probably 40 to 50% for us. And it's the range. It'll very much depend on the community as well as the type of amenity. So outdoor pools are being opened. Very good guidelines from Ottawa Public Health on that. Outdoor terraces or patios, even with or without amenities like barbecues, are being opened. Party rooms are typically remaining closed. Again, we're minimizing the exposure to larger gatherings. Guest suites are typically remaining closed. Billiard rooms remaining closed. Libraries are hit and miss. We've seen some open where they they have 1 week periods between lendings as a way of trying to address protecting the borrowers. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but our approach has always been, as you opened with at the beginning, a bit of that balance, right? As things open more in the rest of the province, in the rest of the cities, you want to maybe be a little less open in other areas to balance that out, because we see the risk is increasing, and it's going to continue to do that. It's going to be start and stop as we go through this until we get through it, just because of the nature of the way the virus spreads.
Right. In fact, the bad numbers are increasing. I mean, the cases are increasing across the province, certainly in Ottawa as well. There's more cases being detected. And so, and these numbers are really preschool opening. And you know how that works. I mean, if you send your kids to school, and within a week, everybody in the household gets pretty much every illness that's in fashion that year. Catherine, I'm going to turn to you. How is Toronto tackling reopening amenities?
I would say that the situation is the same. Perhaps some additional consideration, in particular in Toronto, where we're very much vertical communities, some thought had been put into whether that's going to increase pressure on things like the elevators. Once again, every condominium corporation is different. They're different in terms of the resources they have available, the size of the rooms in particular, and a lot of thought has been put into the plans by the boards and their managers about what they can arrange and how they can ensure that there is safety. The other piece, so following up on what both Sean and yourself has said, if you haven't opened your amenities, tomorrow isn't the greatest day, because you're starting to see more activity because of schools and the interactions of people there. I don't know that you want to encourage more interactions within your own condominium if you haven't already started. Some of the gyms in Condoland are very small, one person, one unit per booking. As Sean and I discussed when we were preparing the other day, 45-minute time frame so that you've got some sanitation time in between. And of course, making sure that you have documentation so that you can contact trace out if public health were to inquire with you. Boards have thought about how we move in a way that is a continual plod forward as opposed to having to jump back. And that's because they've listened to public health recommendations. People have said that is harder on our little brains. It's better to know what to expect and to plod along. The other thing that they've contemplated is when and if they would actually close amenities that had been opened. And some of them had talked about numbers out in the community or numbers within their walls if they were to find out about them. So those are other things to think about. And yes, valet services have reopened in portfolios that I am working with some specific sanitation processes in place, of course, and protective protocols.
You're just bragging about valet service. You just want to show off that you guys have valet service.
Much to my chagrin, yeah. Yes.
Well, we also have valet services here in the countryside in Ottawa, but it's for the library, really.
And for skis, right? Don't you have like a ski valet that just puts your skis away and brings them back out afterwards? Yeah.
That's right. So before I go to Jason, and Jason, you're going to walk us through the analysis and the precautions and so on and so forth. I'm just going to do one last stop with legal, with Denise. I assume that condo boards are going to you and they're asking you, so what's the recommendation? And they're relying on our legal recommendation because of the protection that flows from having followed the advice of a lawyer. So what is the advice? And is there a one-size-fits-all advice, Denise?
No.
What's the advice on that?
Yeah, it's the same advice I think that Jason will probably give, is that, when is it safe to open up the amenities? Each corporation has different amenities, and some gyms it may not be safe to open, while others it may be if the protocols are put in place. So it's really specific to your condominium corporation. It's not one size fits all. And, it's maintaining those protocols and then being aware that, what are you going to do if something happens? So you better be sure that you're following those protocols and have that in place properly.
Right, and that's the thing. That's when people ask us about that. I remind people that the condo corporation is responsible to control and manage and administer the common elements. And I also remind our condo corps that you are responsible to take reasonable precautions to ensure the reasonable safety of those on your premise. And so if the COVID hits the fan and you're being asked, what precautions have you taken? Your answer can't be nothing. I just did, we're in phase 3 or stage 3 and we just opened everything and vive la France. That can't be the answer that you're going to give when you're going to be cross-examined. You know, the question will be, what precautions have you taken? And you have to take reasonable precautions. And there's a range, you know, from taking no precautions, bad idea, to never opening your amenities until they come up with a vaccine, right? And so that's at the other end of the range. And it's becoming more and more difficult to sort of keep the amenities closed indefinitely. And I'm not sure that that is necessarily required, depending on your setup and so on and so forth. But there's a range, there's like worlds between these two extremes. And what we've done, I mean, I have a list of about 23 precautions or 23 questions you should ask yourself, and ask yourself which of these precautions would fit in my condo corp. The liability is now what we call strict liability. If somebody sneezes, you're not automatically liable and responsible. You're not going to have to pay damages. It's going to be a question of what precautions have you taken, right? And so have a look at this endless list of precautions and ask yourself which precautions make sense for you to be in the safer zone or closer to the safe zone as opposed to no precaution. So, and keep in mind that gyms continue to be a high risk activity, even for the province. And so it's really possibly one of the last amenities that you should open because it presents a higher level of risk. And because the province is expecting additional precautions. If you look at when the province did allow gyms to open, they had a shopping list of precautions that they wanted the YMCA and the Good Life to take. Well, that should be an inspiration for you. And before I turn to you, Jason, I'm just going to wait till I run out of time for you, just as I usually do. Sorry about that. But the last thing I wanted to do before I turn the mic to you, I want to talk about online booking and touchless booking. And there's all sorts of possibilities out there. And I'm just going to talk about one. I'm going to talk about this one here that I stumble upon on Twitter. It's a Secured Condo that's offering that. And I mean, I'm sure there's others that offer that, but basically, you know, they set it up for you. And you can see there's various sort of amenities that are open. The gym is closed in that example. The barbecue is open. The pool is open. And when you go and you book, what it allows you to do, it allows you to select the time where you want it, whether it's going to be 45 minutes or whatever it is, right? And when you pick a time, then it tells you what days are available and so on and so forth. Let me see for this to work. There it is. And so it tells me, well, these are the options, right? And so I can book, let's say at noon for that day. Then I complete the information. What's my unit number? What's my name? And so on and so forth. Just going to remove the phone number here. I don't want people to start calling me. And what I really like about this one is that it actually puts to you the screening COVID questions, COVID screening questions, basically. And so, and the booker has to answer these questions. You know, they haven't been in contact with somebody that was sneezing, and they, you know, don't have COVID, and so on and so forth. And then there's an acceptance of terms and conditions. And then I assume you submit that. I'm not going to submit it because I don't want to take someone's spot away at noon. But basically, this is one example, and it's fully in line with what the province recommended for gyms. Online booking, the ability to trace, the ability to know who used it when, the phone numbers to call them, and so on and so forth. And you got the questions that are included. And if you don't answer the questions, you can't book it. So anyways, so there it is. I hope I didn't steal all your thunder, Jason, but on to you now. What's the analysis? How do you tackle this? I think I have a slide for you.
Yeah, listen. Oh, thank you. I see it up on the screen. I mean, I think the really important takeaway is that I think it's important to have a plan. And that plan at times will identify that you should not open up that amenity. And each plan should be specific to that specific amenity, specific to that building within that specific geographical location. So when we talk about risk, we look at the design of the room and its intended purpose versus its actual use. I've toured many gyms that were used to be, you know, garages or shops or guest suites that were turned into gyms. And the ventilation systems or the design of that system or the access control to that to that amenity may not be suitable for opening. So that's a part of that risk review. The demographics of the building absolutely play an important role on whether you decide in your plan to open up that amenity or not. The geographical location, known hotspots within the province, the density of that community. If you're in a community that is very dense, St. Jamestown is one of the most populated areas in North America. That would be one area that may have a higher risk of transfer in that area. Travel and route requirements and actually getting to the amenity. Some amenities are easily accessible. You're not forced to send a high amount of traffic through the lobby, through the elevators, through the touch points. But again, these are all little considerations that the condo corporations can utilize. Facts to consider, I'm not going to go through all of them, but there are some big ones that you want to make sure you're doing. New policies and protocols and communications to the owners. This is critical. So one of the best practices I've seen is that you develop a 2 or 3 page plan for each amenity that covers the risks and some of the considerations that you're looking at, and then discusses some of the things that we've got up on the board here as far as factors to consider. But as soon as that 2 page plan is done for that amenity, I suggest you not only post it at the entrance to that amenity, but you post it or share it with all your owners. Why? Because you've done some really hard work and some research and analysis, whether or not to open this. And if your plan says you should not open it, then you don't open it. And you be very transparent and allow everybody to understand why you didn't open it. And if you did, you're also being transparent, allowing them, the owners, to understand your limitations and exactly what you're cleaning. Because in a recent interview, and I'll end here, of residents in 4 or 5 condos that we've just recently visited, the majority, and when I say the majority of residents did not have a clear understanding of what additional cleaning was or those schedules. So I'm a big firm believer in being transparent, and then you can have everybody understand your plan.
Right. Perfect. Well done. I think we're pretty much within our time limits. That's fantastic. And I'm trying to do 2 things.
Rod, we're professionals. We would never go over the limit.
That's right. Okay, well, folks, that's about it for us. We're going to do as we usually do. I'm going to go around the table, try to get within 30 seconds, 15 seconds for Catherine. I'm going to try to get sort of your parting words. And then after that, we'll talk about next webinar. And so just going around the table in alphabetical order, I'm going to start with Sean, the Terminator. Sean, thank you so much from Apollo Property Management. Thanks so much for your time and wisdom. Parting words?
Keeping it simple, I feel a bit of a back to the future. Same thing. Take your time, think about how you're moving ahead, and no rushing into it. There's a lot going on, especially right now. So you can observe and make sound decisions going forward.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thanks so much. And from Crossbridge, speaking on behalf of ACMO, Catherine Gao, words of wisdom before we go.
Winter is coming. I know we've just barely finished the summer, but some of the tasks that we would normally prepare for in winter might be more difficult to accomplish. And some of the cabin fever is bound to set in again come winter time. So if you haven't already turned your mind to what you're going to do through this winter, I think it's time to start.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us tonight, Catherine. Denise Lash from Lash Condo Law, and speaking on behalf of CAI Canada. Thanks for being with us. Parting words of wisdom, Denise, until next month.
Well, it's really reminding everybody to attend the virtual conference next week. There's going to be great information. You're going to talk about, Graham's going to talk about virtual meetings, hybrid meetings. Rod, you're going to be talking about very interesting things with David. So please attend. It's really worth the $35 or free if you're a member. September 16th and 17th.
Wonderful. It's just around the corner. And from our condo twins, Graham Milley, McPherson of Gowling WLG, parting words of wisdom.
Well, I mean, obviously, be careful if you are going to be a lip syncer, because it will catch up with you and ruin your music career. Second of all, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. We know it's been a while, and we do appreciate everybody taking the time from their evenings to come be with us tonight. So thank you very much, and it's good to be back.
Thank you. From Gowling WLG, David Vanelli Plotkin. Words of wisdom.
We talked a bit before about the orders still in place and certain things coming and going. My litigator is going to show right now, but limitations periods that were suspended during COVID are re-upping as of September 14th. So if you are involved in some sort of litigation or contemplated litigation and that was put on the back burner, definitely get in contact with your counsel of choice, because those limitation periods are back and the clock is ticking. And Zoom Court is the new way of doing things, and it's actually worked pretty well so far.
Yeah, so David was preparing to argue before the divisional court. It was on an appeal, and he showed up wearing a suit and tie, except he was wearing shorts and flip-flops. But nobody knew better. And so the last but not least, from the National Life Safety Group, thank you so much, Jason Reed, for being with us. Any words of wisdom before we go?
No, thank you. Again, I echo the transparency. Eventually, owners are going to request some form of documentation that says, how did you determine not to open the amenities? So the plan is a good process either way. So good luck.
I love that. I love that. Okay, folks. So we're not going to do weekly webinars because I've aged about 10 years when we were doing that. We're going to do them monthly. It's going to be the first Wednesday of the month. Well, unless something happens, and then we will regather quickly. But the first Wednesday of each month. So the next webinar will be October 7th at 5 p.m. Information will be posted on condoadvisor.ca. You'll need to register again, but you may have noticed that registration was different this time around. Hopefully you found it easier. And this is where you'll find the information about the webinars simply by going to Condo Advisor and click on the webinar tab at the top. So that's it. That's it for us. So we're 3 minutes over the hour, but I can't thank you enough, all of you on the panel and everybody at home, for taking the time to joining us tonight. And we'll see you in about a month. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.